guys are always hitting that button. You got like a wailing trigger pinky or something. All right, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. It's the 11th. Yeah, we had to postpone last night because, business, life, university, courses, review, topics. Who's getting ready for midterms coming up in about a week and a half? Oh my gosh, midterms. Getting set up for that dry eye, teary eye of facing a computer. That's all good though. That's all good. Good topic for tonight. Justice, the mind, mental illness, criminality, criminalistics, criminology, the elephants in the room. Yeah, to include you, the elephant in the room. The one who would think, well, there's nothing wrong with me. That would be quite possibly you. I have no mental illness. Oh, contraire, puter. Yes, everyone does. Everyone. You ever read the DSM lately? Research a little bit of the DSM in comparison with the American Psychological Association about yourself, not other people, just about you. So let's kick this off and get into it. First of all, before we do it and get into it, I'm going to thank all of my researchers through all of the episodes. And we've got more episodes coming. We got a whole blanket list of cool episodes. We've got some heartfelt episodes, some interesting, intriguing episodes. We've had a few interesting, intriguing episodes here in the past, but we got better coming up in the future. And when I say better, much like this one, the elephant in the room, no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to actually dive deep into the CJ, criminal justice aspect, criminology aspect, sociological aspect, or the psychological aspect, the psyche of the mind, the mens rea, the developmental trait, the mental reasoning, causations. But we're going to do that. So I like to thank the actual researchers that have, contributed, in the past, 3 to 4, and to this one, and incoming, for next ones, Amanda Blankenship, Chloe Hensley, and Dylan McDonald. Yes, we've got them all there. I'll leave them up for a little bit. Now, keep this in mind also. Everything that we do here on CJTV is academic. Sure, someone argued that there's a little political venue to it, but you can't have academics without sociology. Can't have CJ without politics and money. Criminal justice, politics and money. Period. Done. Over. Executive, legislative, judicial. Yes. Unlike a sheriff that did not know what branch of the government he existed in here recently that's circulating the world of social media. Green coat, sheriff, 4 stars, each shoulder. It's cool to look good, but it's also cool to know your place in the sector of government of the top 3. So, without any further ado, justice in the mind. Tonight, as I said, we're talking about one of the most complex, sensitive, and frequently on a daily basis misunderstood topics in the CJ system, criminal justice. It's the relationship of mental illness and criminal behavior. Yeah, behavior, choice theory, rational, simple behavior, how one is raised in layman terms, the sociological effect, the environment. It's easy to assume based on movies, books you've read, newspaper headlines, social media, but the reality is there's no nuance to it. There's no shiny star. There's no cool cinematic pretext of the FBI profiler or the person in the room that is the knowledge base of all of the information when it comes to the human mind, one of the hardest things to tackle on earth, the human mind. So we're going to break it down into a few scholarly peer review opinions and systematic challenges with definitions that we're facing every day. So let's kind of kick this off and enjoy it. Kick back, relax, get your whatever your favorite snack in the bowl is, something to drink, snuggle up with the dog, the significant other, and let's talk about the myth, the reality of violence. Yeah. Detailed descriptors, detailed descriptions. Okay. First, you got to bring to the forefront by addressing as I said, the elephant in the room, the stigma, the you. For decades, movies, newspapers, articles, publications, reports, they've all painted the same picture. The crazy killer, leading the public to believe mental illness, equates to or equals violence. So that's the stigma. I'm talking to all of you too. It's the classroom right here. Yeah, thanks. So it's the stigma. It's the elephant in the room. It was put out on social media, so it must be true. Mental illness is violence. Wrong. Not the fact not even the correct opinion under scholarly peer review. The vast majority of people living with mental illness, conditions that are trait, mediological, or mental illness that's induced by body harm. Yes, traumatic brain injury. The vast majority of, people worldwide living with that mental illness, condition, they are not violent. They're actually more likely to be victims of a crime. Why? Easy to manipulate, misunderstood, sociological, predatory means of criminalistic behavior. Think of it as comparison to crime against the child, crime against the senior citizen, someone who is easy to manipulate, easy to influence, and easy to physically dominate. Statistics and research and law enforcement. This is key. Research and law enforcement consistently show that only a small percentage of those in society worldwide, and this doesn't come from the United States under research and statistics from both academic and law enforcement, but those worldwide with a serious mental illness are people that violence is committed upon. Not that the one with the mental illness is committing the violence. Mental illness, victimization in society. Factors like poverty, substance abuse, the history of being a victim of abuse yourself is a stronger, predictor of criminal behavior. You yourself, society, what you watch on TV, what you see, what kind of games you play on your Xbox and Super PlayStation, the things you tolerate, the things you find amusing, the things you find entertaining in society that portray mental illness as a violent factor. The predatory to, hey, what is real? What is not real? Mental illness, the people, society with mental illness, often find themselves the victims of mental illness behavior in society, meaning those with mental illness are easy targets, easy to victimize, but those that are committing the victimization also display a mental illness. Criminal behavior, more predictors in society than in the identified sociological percentage of those diagnosed with mental illness, deemed by the courts of having a mental illness, recognized or identified by the communities of, hey, that person's crazy or has a mental illness. Even law enforcement themselves, all right? Society has to stop the blame game, all right? Stop blaming the entire group for the actions of a few, meaning the mental illness sector predominantly within society is seen as, in layman terms, the bad, when in fact it's not. Society is the bad influence on those with mental illness. And this comes from a guy with a lot of experience in law enforcement, medical, psychological, sociological. Seen a lot of it. I've arrested more people for abuse of mental illness citizens than I have mental illness committing a crime. And that is reality. That's the fact. Associated mental illness, all right? A simple association. And kind of keep this in mind. We're going to cover a lot of things here, and you may hear some terms or, some arguments that are unfamiliar to you. And if it is, please put it in the chat so that we can identify it, break it down so that it's easier to understand and recall, that file cabinet's opening up. All right. The definition, all right. A broad term covering the wide range of conditions. And guys, keep in mind, I got a teleprompter and I've got, the staff here, I've got the assistants. If I didn't have the assistants here, I wouldn't be able to have such a cool show going on. Yeah. So the broad team covering the wide range, okay? The broad term of mental illness covers a wide range that affect persons in society. A person's mood, thinking, their behavior, their rational choice theory, why one chooses to act or perform in a specific manner that they act and or perform. Why one chooses to associate with the people that they associate with, why one chooses common predictor conditions like depression, anxiety response, as well as more severe disorders. Yes. An example, physical, mediological, induced by trauma, TBI, traumatic brain injury, hardening of the brain tissue up front, schizophrenia. One chooses to still socialize, but one has a anxiety because of the frontal lobe damage, what one sees, the sensory, anxiety, fear. Things are not being interpreted the way a person without a physical abnormality, mental abnormality, brain abnormality, the central nervous system abnormality. Things aren't being interpreted the same. So the anxiety is there, thus the depression, because one feels they're alone. So one would go see with, the diagnosis of hardening brain tissue. We're not going to get into the medical, mediological pretext of it, but those that are in the field understand TBI, hardening of the brain tissue, a biomediological mental illness that is actually TBI related, schizophrenia. One leaves after the movie. Everybody knows everybody has to go to the bathroom after the movie. Oh, that's a good movie. So the one with the perceived schizophrenia, the anxiety, the depression, can possibly talk to Dracula or another vampire, a Nosferatu, and the mirror. Doesn't mean the person is violent. It's an abnormality, but it was caused by a physical dilapidation and injury, TBI, and biomedical, right? Paternal, maternal, genetics, gene passed down. Things that we need to understand are broad definitions. Even the DSM doesn't cover everything. More has been taken out of the DSM in the past few years that has been added to. If you do not understand that, or you have a belief of, hey, I don't like what this guy just said, go get an older DSM, then get a DSM that's 4 to 5 years, and then get the newest DSM. Go to specific chapters, go to specific set standards that you would believe you could read and would be the same. They're not. They're not. One of the big, changes in the DSM-5, the new one. Do I have a DSM-5 over there? Yeah, I see it. It's right there. Purple book. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So it's right there. If anybody has a question, we can counter it right here. One of the big things that are left out of the DSM-5 are race, culture, creed. Yes. Taken out, stricken, gone. How do I know? Had an argument with the whole APA. 2020. Lucky me, I was successful. And had a few conflicts with some of the DSM-5, script deliverers, the researchers. But that's all good. That's all academic peer review. But in society doesn't understand the academic side. They do not understand the CJ side. They do not understand the medical practitioner, the doctors, the psychologists, those that are, Ward 4, the psychological assessment for CJ, psychological assessment for the courts. Those are the ones that are charged with actually establishing what is the identified mental disorder or mental disease. Yes, mental disease. Mental disease can be caused by trauma, foreign substance, something that affects the body adversely, that affects the actual brain and dilapidates the brain and then converts to irrational behavior. What is the definition of insanity? The continuous loop of something that doesn't work again. Not to say that, you're mentally crazy, like a crazy person out on the street, collecting and eating garbage with the raccoons, but the definitive nature of the ununderstood broad definitions. The roles, substance abuse, dual diagnosis roles. Yep, substance abuse. One of the biggest detailed descriptive natures of mental illness. When we look at the intersections of mental illness and the law, we often find that red tape guy, that third player. Yeah, the third player. Addiction, abuse, alcohol, drugs, the gateway drug. Why? It is easy to find comfort in something that acts as a solicitor to antidepressant, anti-anxiety, especially someone that is building or starting to develop symptoms of depression, anxiety. But for someone with that mental illness, that's not a perceived choice. That's not something that one seeks out to, buy a bag of depression, buy a bag of anxiety. It's a step. It's a predictor, the narcotics, the use, the co-occurring diagnosis of the dual disorder. This happens when someone struggles with mental illness and substance abuse and uses the terminology of mental abuse, mental illness, substance abuse as the disorder all in the same when it's not. Different scenarios, different direct causations, and different direct choice theories under rational choice theory or problematic selection theories to solve problems, ease tension, ease anxiety. This is why when we talk about the criminal justice area, this is why, there are the spikes with mental illness, drugs, narcotics, abuse, influence, what we see. Think about children. Standard child. You see plenty of parents, they do not want the child to, bother them. So let's give them a cell phone. Let's give them a tablet. That'll keep them busy so he can go do the adult things. Well, what's that child looking at? What's that child watching? It's being instilled in the episodic memory files, the hippocampus, the limbic system. So it's there. That's an influence. Does that not yet create unrational choice theory, unrational, moral, not moral, ought to? Who's a big PlayStation player? Grand Theft Auto, prostitution, drugs, murder, narcotic, killing people, stealing cars. The mental dilapidation or mental disorder is influenced just the same as society members without a diagnosed mental illness. It's the same. Same with narcotics and alcohol, or something that would be a dual diagnosis contributor or co-occurring disorder, mental illness and addiction. Unfortunately, this leads to, more continued addiction to something, to include social media, the influence. The mental illness, is the social media real? Is there an argument as to what is true and what's not? Is there an argument of convincing falsehood versus reality? Not real. Imagination suddenly becomes real. Anything that sounds as a rational choice theory of, this sounds good, I should believe it. Now it's real. Much like going to the movie and seeing the Nosferatu on the TV, on the video screen. It's impressive. It is now seated in the hippocampus and the limbic system. Therefore, now it has causation to be recalled. Aid in another disorder. Think about it. How many of you watch the superstar vampire movies like the Originals or the Vampire Diaries? There's always some bourbon and some drugs. Always. It's good entertainment. Great. I love the original TV series. One of my favorite TV series is like Klaus, the figure, just the actor, the Nosferatu ensemble. But it's fake. It's fictitious. It's an influence. Not that it's a bad influence on society, but it can have a negative influence on those that have the co-occurring dual disorder. Once addicted, those with a mental illness, a simple person may commit crimes like theft, burglary, fraud, money laundering, or support their habit. It's just like a narcotic addict. Steal, pawn, sell, money, drugs. Steal, pawn, sell, money, drugs. Now, we're not making excuses for this for those that do not have a mental illness or dilapidative brain disorder. Those that do not, it's a rational choice theory. But then again, society has that influence on rational choice. Developmental choice theory, developmental cycles. Child, infant, child, young teen, young adult, older adult. Once addictive, it's a continuous cycle. The substance impairs the judgment. The judgment would already be impaired if one recognizes that there is a high possibility of a mental illness. Sometimes in law enforcement it is. Interdictive stops, law enforcement, for the sheriff in the green coat that's circulating the planet, the senator or congressman. If you're listening to this, sheriff, I don't know where you're at, but I did see the video. Some of you know what I'm talking about. The guy that was, babbling and trying to make you look this small, he was wrong too. Yes, you are executive, but you're executive and judiciary, not just executive. He kind of cut it off at the hilt and left a few things out to make himself look good. Yeah, executive judiciary review of the legislative branch. So technically you have influence on the legislative branch, and no, the jail is not just your responsibility. It would be the county and law enforcement, unless you're metroized. Whole nother story. Now, associated mental illnesses, substance abuse. Even somebody with a mental illness can understand everything I just said versus someone who does not have a mental illness, who doesn't even know that. All right, substance use disorder, SUD, S-U-D, definition. The medical condition where a person uses a legal or illegal drug, alcohol, or medications, and leads to health issues. Yes, you would be shocked in peer review, scholarly research, meta-analysis, qualitative, quantitative, quasi-experimental design, longitudinal length studies, or something that would be, quasi for those that are, statistics and researchers, that experimental quasi-design where you can reach and move and shift as long as you can design it and, argue that it has a, set precedent for your review of your study. with the limitations and restrictions too, but you'd be surprised how much of it is out there that actually proves and shows without the shadow of a doubt with statistical review from law enforcement agencies and governmental entities of the executive, legislative body, and judicial review. Yep, that sheriff. So it's out there. Disabilities, health issues, the failure to meet the responsibilities of the mental illness, the mentally dilapidated in society because of the codependencies. School, home. It includes addicted dependence. You think that everybody that has a mental illness is singular solo out there on the road? No, they have families, loved ones, husbands, wives, children. That's why at the start of the show, I said, this is about you. Everyone has a mental illness. Yeah, even this guy. So do you. Shaking your head, looking at your tiny phone or your laptop or whatever. Yeah, you do. Yeah. Untreated psychosis. All right. Untreated psychosis, and we'll just use paranoia as an example, okay? The detailed descriptors, all right? Detailed descriptors. One word for the most tragic scenario in the criminal justice systems involves anyone, victim, a suspect, a observer, a witness, suffering from untreated psychosis. Untreated. That is why you hear thrown around the CJ system and the entertainment world of Hollywood, not guilty by reason of insanity. Hasn't been found yet, hasn't been ID'd yet. The defense attorney's favorite plea, the defense attorney's favorite tool, even though discovery was petitioned for and full discovery was done, non-exculpatory, non-moot, non-suggested of, he said, she said, supposed evidence. It's all clean. It's all going to come. That last fork of arrow of defense, mental assessment, psychosis, a paranoia, a paranormal, something that is not in the realm of the normal for society. All right? Psychosis is the state where a person loses contact with reality. Everyone's heard of that temporary insanity. The mom's children were being assaulted or attacked, and the mom went into a psychosis. Doesn't remember, can't recall. I heard voices. The devil made me do it. That psychosis. The devil told me to do it. Voices disclosing things such as details. Yeah. Delusions. Hearing things that are not true, but in the mind, it's true. Much like the schizophrenia from hardening of the brain tissue that leaves the movie and goes into the bathroom, and now they're talking to Dracula or their favorite Nosferatu from the movie they just saw. And the rest of society is seeing this, and they're witnessing, yes, schizophrenia due to a TBI or a mediological trait or something in the brain that hardens the brain tissue. But now society doesn't understand this. So what they're seeing for someone that understands what's being put out there with, social media and the TV, this is someone with psychosis. No, it's a psychosis event. It's a psychosis event, okay? Believing things that are not true. Rare case. Rare. Also rare. Hard to prove, too. Historical venue, hard to prove. Set precedent, hard to prove. Appeals, hard to prove. More appeals have been held with the finding standing of the first initial court, even if the appeal was granted for the argument of psychosis and psychological interdiction or review. More cases have failed in the appeal court than have ever been successful. Do your own research. I challenge you, says this guy, Dr. G, Dr. Mike Gurley. All right. If a person has a paranoid delusions within the CJ system that we're recognizing and we're seeing, they may genuinely believe that someone is trying to kill them and their family. Now, I know, sociological joke. This person's crazy. They think somebody's out to get them. Well, to that person, it's real. It's 100% real because that's a psychosis event. It's not real. It's a psychosis. There's a reason for that. Thus, it goes unrecognized, typically in society, and typically by loved ones, family members, friends. It's kind of equal to the miss of society of suicide traits, things that are being exhibited that one would see. Psychosis is the same way. It's passed off, laughed at, scoffed at, kind of moved to the side. So that's a society fault. It's a law enforcement fault. It's a sociological fault. It's a university's fault for not teaching these things. It's society's fault for not listening and understanding these things. But, we try our best in society. Would like to hope that there's more ought to than ought not. All right. And the person with the psychosis event, okay, in their mind, hitting or hurting that person is a simple act of self-defense. It's not a criminal attack with intent. The mens rea is not solid, meaning the mental state of the person during the actus rea, the physical act of the crime. The mental state is not there. There's already a dilapidation. There's a psychosis event. It's already, in layman terms, twisted, broken. Something is happening that has put that person into the position during a psychosis event to now elevate. This is a threat against me. I must act in self-defense. The threat must be overridden. The law enforcement, the threat must be terminated. I said threat terminated. I did not say what everybody likes to use, threat killed. Why didn't you shoot him in the leg? It's a whole other story. That's called law enforcement officer training. Threat termination. One-time punch to stop the threat. Not risk it to hurt it and let it keep going. The same thing in the mindset of someone with a psychosis event. One would call it delusional. One would call it, temporary insanity, layman terms to it, but it is a psychosis event. It is not an intentful criminal attack with one that has mental dilapidation, mental illness, and is in the moment having a psychosis event. Whereas the brain's fear, the response, the fear mechanism, it overrides the logic rule, dopamine, endorphins. Kind of look at it yourself. Have you ever gotten into an argument and a part of your body hurts? Typically, in human beings, it would be the back or lower back or, hip area because of the dopamine, the endorphins. Where's it dumping to? There's nowhere for it to go. So it's settling in the blood unless the heart rate gets elevated again to cycle through the body and self-cleanse. But now that's putting your kidneys in stress and it's putting everything in the body in stress mode. Now you're going to suffer physical dilapidative problems. Not that it's going to, put you in the hospital, but you're going to feel it for a little while. All right. If these individuals that have undiagnosed mental disorders, psychosis incidents, if they're, if they receive proper medical care or treatment, the incidents can be prevented in the future, period. My historical venue in law enforcement, this prevents a lot more. Those terms of crisis intervention, verbal judo, even for some of you older guys, cops, older guys and girls, remember the verbal judo course. Yeah. Incident response, crisis intervention, de-escalation. Yeah, these are things that we have to, focus on more. Even members in society, everybody likes to attach these fancy words of sociological de-escalation for, criminal activity to be just law enforcement. It's not true. Law enforcement comes from society. Where's the predictor for the need in society? It comes from society. Thus, sheriff in the green coat and the big social media thing that everybody's, making fun of. I can understand society making fun of it, but the one asking the question was in the wrong too. If the one in the seat with the mental dilapidation of cognitive ability and recall of the 3 levels of government, executive, judicial, and legislative, you screwed that up too, guy. Now you've put someone in law enforcement in a mental dilapidation, and it was witnessed because of the physical kinesic response of the sheriff in the chair and those around him. Even, which would be someone, couldn't tell the rank or who they were, but the female in the green uniform that was sitting to, it would either be the right or the left, camera shifts, shifting the frame, this up, horizontal shift or whatever. But everybody noticed it. Now everybody's going into that dissociation. That sheriff wanted to dissociate himself from those questions so quick, it was not funny. You could tell by the linguistic tenure and the linguistic value of the response. Now, it's not an attack. It's not a true attack. It's a political move attack. It's not a true in danger attack. So now here comes the psychosis event of something that's a linguistic attack. Now the brain interprets it one way for someone that's in a position of executive and has judiciary responsibility, because law enforcement is the first level of judiciary when law enforcement is made the scene or called to go to the scene. It's the first contact. Think about the mentally ill. They're going to see it. What's the threat value? It's a fathomistic bubble that one has to think in, and it happens that quick. That fast. Snap of a finger, the blink of an eye, the response. I know, we're throwing a lot out here. It's like drinking out of a fire hose. Remember, the chats are open. If you got any questions or comments, send it. If you got any emails about this show, we got a few more things we're going to talk about. This is going to be a pretty interesting show. Send it. drmikeleeg@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Rumble, we're on YouTube, we're on X, and we're on Kick. All right. We're about to do some TikTok stuff, but I'm not a TikTok genius. I'll let my assistant researchers, speaking of the assistant researchers, I'll let them educate me on how to use the tickety talk tickety, because that's not my gambiti. That rhymed, didn't it? Yeah, I told you I was a good rapper. Yeah, let's stop laughing. All right, I am. Associated mental illness, schizophrenia, the thing I was just talking about, a chronic and severe mental disorder that affects how a person thinks, feels, behaves. Interpretation of smell, visual, audible. People with schizophrenia may often feel like they have lost touch with reality. Kind of the opposite end of the reflection inside the mirror of the psychosis. There's no reality. It's something that's not real, but the psychosis and the schizophrenia together lost touch with reality. Everything that is being heard, thought of, or sensoried into the brain is not real. Now it becomes terrifying. Terrifying to the one with schizophrenia. Now, impulsivity, the mania, the frantic, the detailed disorder, the response of the psychosis or the schizophrenic episode or the other dilapidative mental illness that the person has been diagnosed with or undiagnosed because nobody's paid attention and no one knows. Not even the one with the mental illness or the dilapidative measure. The impulsivity, okay? Impulsiveness, if you want to say it that way. The mania, detailed description. Some mental health, conditions affect the brain's ability to pump the brakes, put a stop on the scenario, put a stop on the bad thinking, the bad response theory, the bad moral ought to, the bad moral ought not. The brain has no brakes on it. There is no physical stop, much like raise your right arm. It's in movement. Move it this way. Stop. You can stop. The brain cannot stop. It's not going to shut itself down due to the manic episode. A person feels as if they were on top of the world and everything is real, even though the exclusivity of them being alone or out of touch with reality is known. But they're still the one on the top. They're still the one that's in threat. They're still the one that's in control of the situation, in full control of the moment. The manic episode, that person may have boundless energy for days. They're in a psychosis manic episode. It can last for days, much like a meth extravaganza high. Yeah, anybody ever in law enforcement ever dealt with somebody that's been on a meth binge, a drug binge for days? Same effect to the brain. There's no break. There's no pumping. There's no stop. There's no emergency stop switch, all right? Days without sleeping, days without eating, believing everything is real. Believing that everything they do is worthwhile, requires high energy, leads to devastating poor decision-making, though. Yeah, devastating, life-destroying because of the perception that it's right, all right? Those people aren't necessarily bad people, okay, in the moment. The psychosis, the mental detail, the mental breakdown, the association of the moment, the fear, the threat, the manic, the descriptive, unpumping of the brakes, the definition of the chronic and or severe mental disorder is not known to them. They're not thinking of that. They're not thinking of that, oh, this is a manic episode. It's not on the forefront of their brain. Put in the chat if you've ever witnessed someone with a manic episode. Put it in there. What were the qualities? What was going on? What was being seen? Put it in the comments so other people can read it. Everybody, put it, in the live stream. Put it in the comments so that people can watch the video and actually see that people do see these things. They have to interpret these things. And it's not just law enforcement. Now, and the key kicker is law enforcement comes from society. Cops aren't grown in trees or gardens. FBI agents aren't born on the FBI farm or, at Quantico on the north side of the Yellow Brick Road. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, you made it through the obstacle course, huffing and puffing, and you got your little brick because you attended the National FBI Academy. Yeah. So let's move to the other one. Bipolar disorder. Oh, my goodness. One of my favorite movies of all time is the very first Boondock Saints. Because of, the old Scottish guy that, had the bar. And was he Scottish or Irish, whatever, the blank, 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 the words, right? The mood, the bipolar, the shift characterized by extreme shifts, extreme moods, energy, activity. This leads to shifts in range of extreme escalation of mania. Yeah. the dopamine dump, the endorphin dump. Things have to happen, the response, from periods of short times, long times, and bipolar pushes toward hopelessness, down, depressed, self-worth, dignity, especially the self-worth and depression trigger. That's a common known argumentative fact that, psychologists or, psychiatrists have to deal with when dealing with someone that's truly diagnosed with a mania and or bipolar disorder. It's the self-worth. The fight or flight, the post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I know everybody hears this and it's thrown around like a loose noodle in a blanket coverall, but we're going to cover it shortly here so that you can actually get the vigilant red alert of the terminology, okay? Post-traumatic stress disorder changes the way a person's brain processes stress. Period. Period. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not a gambit like a radar detector that's going to show you whether the person's good or bad. A person with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, lives in a state of mild to hypervigilance. Why? The nervous system quickly reacts to anything that would be perceived as a red alert. And we're not talking about somebody that, a space shuttle door gunner, Rocky Bullwinkle Ninja Recon Ranger raccoon. No, it could be somebody in society. No, I'm not trying to insult the military, prior military myself. So we're not trying to put PTSD on one category of society or humans in general. Anyone that witnesses trauma, that red alert, if a police officer approaches a stranger, too quickly, that rapid movement because of probable cause the officer witnesses, high stress, triggered alert. Not that the person that's being approached is fully intentful of defending oneself and charging the officer is a defensive move. How is it being perceived with the person that is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder? Things that law enforcement has the blink of an eye, just seconds to interpret. Thus, society has weeks and months to break it down. What about law enforcement with PTSD? Everybody wants to argue the law enforcement did, the cops did this wrong. Well, how many times have law enforcement been in that red alert situation compared to standard society? More so than standard society because the numbers are down. The standard society does not want to go in, especially the youth. Nobody wants that 12-hour shift, that dedication, that long academy, months, weeks, and possibly a year plus away from family, the lifestyle, the clubs, the video games, the friends. Yeah. No one wants that mania introduced. No one wants that red level of trauma. So the person with PTSD may lash out to protect themselves. Yeah. You'll find more so that those that have been diagnosed with PTSD, and it's in a record somewhere, a lot of the courses are, the court cases are either reduced or, so to say, magically expunged because it wasn't a personal thing against law enforcement. It was a mental disorder. This is a major reason why you see high rates of arrest, among military veterans, those that have been victims of trauma, assaults, domestic violence. Yeah, we got a whole video coming up, a whole episode coming up on why those that are victims still stay. Yes, those are the victims of trauma. Still stay. I love you, baby. We've heard that before. We got a whole new, when's that coming up? That's not the next one. Okay, the next one is youth. And okay, so 2 episodes from now, that will be episode 13. Tune in. That would be an interesting, especially those of you that know someone that is continuously the victim of a bad relationship, assault, trauma, domestic violence. Yeah, mental, verbal, physical, all of it. Associated mental illnesses, all right? So we touched PTSD. We're not going to go drive deep into that because that would be its own concentrated episode because we could dive deep into that for days and hours due to research and, experience in society. Keep in mind, chats are open and the comments are always open and free. We do not restrict anything, but it is academic. We don't do politics and we don't do anything. But yes, I covered the political venue because you think it would not have triggered something if you were publicly put into that spectrum of light or into that position where, well, I didn't hope to get stuck here on this to try to embarrass someone publicly in a congressional review or whatever, element it is. Antisocial personality disorder and the law. Yes, antisocial personality. I don't like them, so you're not going to be social today. Yeah, the antisocial. Everybody's practiced this. Everybody's done this. Everybody's had that moment to where you just don't want to be there. So you're being antisocial. It's not the cool thing for you. It's not something that you want to see. So you're just not relatively going to deal with it anymore. You just don't want it. Antisocial disorder. Yes, I'm closing out some stuff. I'm leaving the chats open because you guys know how it is. You don't want to take all your CPU power away. So, antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, antisocial personality disorder, is distinct, period, very distinctive. It's characterized by a long-term pattern of manipulation. Pattern of manipulation. I apologize. English was not my first language, so some words I say are a little weird. It's a distinct pattern. It's a simple behavior that is characterized by long-term manipulation, exploiting, or violating the rights of others without a sense of guilt. Do not confuse this with narcissism or narcissistic behavior, because it's an anti-personality disorder. It's a red alert. It's a trigger. It's a trauma. A narcissist does it with intent. We had our whole narcissist thing. Yeah, narcissist episode 1 was already done. Episode 2 is coming. So a person with ASPD would often disregard social norms and laws. Now, I've heard this too. You know, I haven't seen any research on it, and I can't say, as you know, a guy at a university, that there's any validity to what I'm about to say here, but sovereign citizen. Never know. Disregard social norms, laws, executive, judicial, legislative. I haven't seen it. I'm not saying it does. I'm saying it would be an interesting research event, wouldn't it? If you think so in your law enforcement, put a comment or a thumbs up on that. All right, so lack of recognition for the norms in the law might still or just be aggregative or aggressive simply because it serves that one person's need, that ASPD, that anti-personality disorder. It just meets their needs. Not that I did not say violent and assault, things that are not the social ought to, the unpleasantries of society, the grumpy old men, so to say, the a-holes, the J-asses, whatever. I can say ass, donkey, whatever. Stop looking at me like that. It's a jackass donkey. Okay, we made a Disney movie with a jackass in it, so we call it an ass and Disney, so we're cool here, scholarly. All right. So the simple things in society that people would see, ASPD, or the interpretation. It's also commonly linked to criminal behavior. Yes, aggressive behavior, things that meet the one singular need. Okay. ASPD does not guarantee, in the criminal justice system, it does not guarantee criminal behavior. Period. Done. Over. They're just anti-personal, anti-social. They're not an extrovert. They're more of an introvert. Closed doors. Now, a lot of you, are like hermits, introverts, don't want to associate with society. We've got it. We've been there. We understand. So, but the word, it's a trait giver. Impulsivity, aggressiveness, high capable, they're very highly capable of lifestyles, very highly capable. They're also very highly capable of lifestyles that are positive and lifestyles that are unpositive. Breaking the law. Most criminals that one would argue are successful, genius, have this, ASPD. Associated mental disorders, antisocial personality, the definitive definition, a mental disorder condition. And I'm going to read this. Hold on. Let me flip through this. Bring that up on this projector. Yeah, move it over here on this screen. Yeah, it's not a projector, it's a monitor. I'm not bringing it. Thank you. Okay. Antisocial personality disorder, a mental disorder or mental health condition in which a person has a long time pattern of manipulation, exploitation, exploiting, or violating the rights of others. This behavior is often criminally linked. Bad behavior with intent. We're not talking about the PTSD response of aggression without formulated, driven, plotted out, intent. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about that. So let me look and check the chats here. I want to see what's coming up. Make sure everything's flowing. Cool. We're good. We're all good on the chats. So competency. All right. Competency to stand trial. That is something that we've got to pay attention to. CST, the detailed descriptor, the detailed, information that society wants to see, wants to hear, wants to comprehend. All right. Detailed descriptors. This is a fundamental concept in criminal law. All right. The competency. Also, within the Bill of Rights, competency is someone competent enough to understand the Fifth Amendment. Are they competent to understand the words coming out of the mouth? Representation, invoke, revoke, right? Fifth Amendment, rules, procedure, competent to stand trial. This is a legal question. This is an assessment question, not just a simple biomedical, physical. It's not just a medical question alone. It's a ethics question at the same time within the CJ system, sociological system, psychological systems, because in law enforcement, criminal justice, sociological, psychological, it's a symbiotic circle. You can't have one without the three, regardless of however anyone argues it that has zero CJ or law enforcement or criminal investigation or anything, any experience whatsoever. They're going to argue it that it's, no, it's not. It's complete circle. It all works together. Done over. You can't prove that it does not, because this guy can prove it all day with hundreds of thousands of researchers and hundreds of thousands of law enforcement. They will look you in the face and say it's a symbiotic circle, because you're dealing with sociological aspect and the psychological venue within the three levels of what? Executive, judicial, and legislative review that recognize all of the mental illness traits and the competency to stand trial, not guilty by reason of insanity. If they didn't blend together, why would we be having this show talking about it? Why would there not be United States Supreme Court opinions and decisions on competency? Yes, research it yourself. The United States Supreme Court. Yep, the evaluation of the competency of a defendant. Do they have rational and or a fractional understanding, all right, of the proceeding? What's going on? Is the person so mentally ill that they think the judge is a Martian or a vampire or a Nosferatu? They understand that it's a human being. Is the person so mentally, ill that they cannot remember what happened yesterday or what happened 10 minutes from now, where they came from, where they're at, what's going on? How they participate in this event, which would be a pre-trial, if they're there to pre-trial evidence, or a grand jury. And just kind of rarely that would happen, but I've seen it happen. Not many times, but I have seen it happen. Probably in my whole career, about three times. I've seen that happen before. So someone show up to a grand jury that was a suspect. Yes, the grand jury had inquiry. Because the grand jury had inquiry, not the prosecutor, not the DA, not the ADA, not a judge, but the grand jury. So the grand jury ceased and desisted for a moment till the suspect got there. Why? Mental dilapidation. That was the question. Competency. All right, severe mental illness. We'll close this out with severe mental illness. I don't want to keep this too long because I got a few things to cover to make sure the sources are out there. All right. Severe mental illness that drifts into NGRI, not guilty by reason of insanity. Sociological, psychological, criminal justice. The definition: mental, emotional, or behavior disorder that results in a serious functional impairment, much like a manic, but more severe. It's continuous. Subsequently, all right, it interferes or limits a person's major life activities. Some would say that severe mental illness can classify under post-traumatic stress disorder. Things that interfere, make life difficult, challenging. The development, communication, thinking, caring for oneself, taking a shower, brushing one's teeth, medical appointments, hearing appointments, dental appointments, whatever. You need a new pair of shoes because yours are falling apart, and being able to tend to one's need. We're not talking about homeless, lack of money, economic. We're talking about the ability is there. but someone is not subsequently participating in it. There's a subsequent thing that could be argued a severe mental illness that is interfering with common major life activities or limits one's ability to exercise common life activities. We're not talking about depression either. Something else. Now, could depression be part of the diagnosis of severe mental illnesses, plural? Of course. But a severe, an SMI, what is the severity that limits it? Trauma, injury, mediological induced from an injury, an injury that affects the cerebral cortex, the spinal cords, the brain in some way, blood flow, oxygen that helps develop into that severe mental illness. Yes, you got to do all the research, in it and actually find it, but it does exist. Maybe we need to do an episode of, a physical abnormality that's induced through physical trauma that develops and is a causation for mental illness. Yeah, remind me of that. I will get, I'll get Z on that. Yes, we'll reach out to Z down in Florida. Z can spearhead that. Why not? She's had international investigation before, published in other countries. I can't think anybody perfect. Psychology, that's Z's gambit. Yes. Not guilty by reason of insanity to be associated and or acquainted with severe mental illness. All right. The detailed descriptors. All right. Insanity, the difference. It's perhaps one of the most famous, misguided, misused legal terms in history, especially social media, the movies, Hollywood. It's a formal term. Formal. The formal term is not guilty by reason of insanity. That's the formal term. That's all it is. It's a term. This is a definition that does not mean the person did not commit the crime. The person committed the crime, sure, but was there a severe mental illness that influenced a what? Manic, an antisocial personal disorder, all triggered at one time. Kind of like all the rats on the ship attacking the one rat that is the king. The one rat that's the king eats all the other ship. The rat that's the king is alone, but everything's coming to attack that one. Severe mental disorder, not guilty by reason of insanity. This means because of the mental illness, that person should not be held criminally responsible for it under definition of proven within legislative venue. The word of law. Was the mens rea there? Was the intent there? We're not there to argue in a courtroom psychological means, psychosis, abnormalities. It's criminal. We have experts for that are allowed to come in, to represent, to argue for prosecution, to argue for defense, review by the court, final decision by the gatekeeper, the magistrate, the judge. Training, experience, education, the amount of times one has actually testified, all of this counts for expert testimony to be accepted by the court and reviewed and used as decision-making by the jury, the expert testimony. Not guilty by reason of insanity. Usually the laws in all 50 states and federal, all right, requires that a person did not know what they were doing at the time of the criminal act was wrong. That is very difficult to prove. Very difficult. And yes, there have been Supreme Court and appellate court decisions, about that. You can research them all day. All right. You have to prove that one individual that is claiming, or their defense is claiming, NGRI, the person didn't understand the nature of their actions in the moment, the outcome, didn't understand what mens rea was, the mental process. What was the exigent circumstance, let alone the mitigating factors. Didn't understand it. It was a threat. There was a causation for response. The dump, the red alert. It's an incredibly high bar, all right, to be cleared. Like I said, it's hard to prove, but rarely successful. Has it been? Yeah. Furthermore, with not guilty by reason of insanity, NGRI, it does not mean the person walks free either. Jury finds, not guilty by reason of insanity. Yeah, they're usually sent to a psychological, confinement, something medical, something, secured, a psychiatric facility. But even within the psychiatric, facility care, if it's found out in the, I have seen this psychiatric, facility care. I've seen it in the state of Arkansas and Mississippi. Psychiatric facility care says, how did the court come to this decision? There's nothing wrong. And yet the facility and the psychologist and the psychiatrist can argue it. Now suddenly there's a means of appellate appeal by prosecution. Oh my gosh. Because of the unjust, incorrect verdict and misuse of court and not guilty by reason of insanity. Yes, I've seen it twice in my life. Yes. Seen it with a juvenile and an adult. Man, it was kind of, I didn't expect it. Heck no. But, that's why you have those, forensic psychologists out there. PhDs, duals, and training. That's why they're out there. That's why we use them. All right. They're usually sent to that, security facility, often, for a period of time. Not a life sentence, but as long or longer as needed, petitioned by the practitioners to the court. But sometimes there can be after treatment and identification, and we'll keep it simple as wellness has been identified by the medical, psychological, psychosis practitioners. All right. Sometimes prison follows. Yes, sometimes prison follows. There have been a lot of case studies about that. And especially for those that are, Track the Innocence Project. Yeah, there's been a lot of cases like that. Let me check a few things here, make sure we're running fine before I cover a few things and give everybody means or source to get some information for the video. And if you look right up top, everything we have right up here, everything we have is on Facebook. When I say have, I mean all of our research, all of our data, the stuff that we can, publish, white papers, information, some short, APA, meta-analysis of stuff, nothing that we're, pushing out to the world for, money. None of our stuff is monetized. We're not making a nickel off of anything, but we are trying to do this, which is a GoFundMe for 2026 fall semester. Take a snapshot of this. It's all over our Facebook. We've got it, I've got it on my LinkedIn for what we're doing, a couple of things. I'll have to re-update it, but we're trying to, gain some money for a competition for a small amount of money. Our goal is $3,000 for a student in CJ, sociology or psychology, one of the three. And we're going to keep doing this throughout this semester, and hopefully we'll get to our goal. So donate, please. And when we get to our goal this summer, we're going to launch the competition, and we're going to do it live here. Updates, all three, Rumble, YouTube, X, and Kick. Let the world know how good the developing scholars are doing. So take a snapshot of it. It's a GoFundMe, and yes, this will be publicly tracked so everybody can see it, even the account itself, to let everybody know what's going on so that we can all celebrate who wins this. But that's if we get to the goal, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. You can hit the like. You can hit the, subscribe. We'd appreciate it because that means you're liking it. Kind of lets us know. So remember this. We always keep all of our stuff on the actual metafile, the media file. And I'm going to open up a horizontal and kind of give everybody wrong one. Open up the vertical. I know, I said horizontal. Yeah, you're quick on the draw. All right. So just exemplars, this is our episodic breakdown, for the episode that we're having right here. And all cited, all APA, everything's formatted, all of our references, and we're using DOIs. So if you don't have access to like a database, shoot us an email. We will get the DOI and we will get the open source URL. A lot of this stuff has open source, so we'll give you means to get into help you, not give it to you, but we will help you, find a means to get into a database. So we're also uploading our PDF of our PowerPoint. Is it uploaded yet? It is? Cool. All right. It's uploaded. It's in Facebook. It's on Media Share. It's being shared out on, I think it's shared just on X, Facebook, and Indeed, right? Okay. Those three. So we've got them there, but these are designed for educational use, help. You never know. Somebody may have a problem in their family, or somebody may have, an assignment or some research coming up. Please download it, use it, but make sure you cite it correctly. And we have white papers that everybody in the academic world knows what a white paper is. It's just the dissemination. Hey, look at this. Look what we did. It's arguable. It's all done through peer review, and we provide everything all the way down to sources. So it's a lot of data. And for the stuff that we actually do put out, and we have put out, there have been a lot of downloads, a lot of stuff that has, been pulled out. And we've got 359 downloads, and this is our 12th episode. No, excuse me. Oh, I can count. No, I can't, right? This is our 11th episode. 12's coming up tomorrow. So we're, man, we're kind of pleased about it. 359 downloads in 35 days. And that's just not me. That is, goes out to assistant researchers. We have a, Jacob, who's another, researcher. Sorry, you're not here. But we had in Z, where we were talking about earlier, not here, but these are, researchers for, the episodes that we got going on right now. And we try to, attribute our researchers for the episodes and the data that we get and stuff that, we use and shift and move and apply. But we got a great pool. So remember, if you have any questions, anything that's a comment, put it in the comments. The comments are open. This is here for academic purpose, academic means, academic use. Don't let it go to the side if you use it, especially if you're a professional practitioner. You may remember some stuff that you forgot a long time ago and you need it now, and it suddenly applies now. So without further ado, everyone, remember, mental illness is not easy to recognize. It doesn't mean somebody's a violent offender. It doesn't mean somebody's going to, go out and become the, vampire Nosferatu, Tarantika devil, Mephistophelies, of the night. No. It's something that you do not understand. It's something that you just simply don't comprehend. It's hard enough for those in the psychological practitionership fields to identify on their own. How's society going to identify it? Especially when the majority of society has a psychological imbalance. Yes, psychological, you definitely have one. Yes, you do. Yeah, everybody does. So, without further ado, thanks for watching the show. Remember, we're going to be on tonight. We're going to be on tomorrow night. And tomorrow night is going to be the episode of Understanding Childhood Trauma and the Effect on the Adult's Life Experience, Rationalization, Descriptors. This will be interesting for those of you that are in the field of sociology, social workers, child protective services, even law enforcement, psychologists, sociologists. It's pretty, interesting, because that's one of those things like mental health. Everybody has an opinion. We're just throwing a few small grains of sand off the beach into each episode. Have a great night. Thanks for watching us. Thanks for hanging out with us.